The silver Rolex wasn't mine. I stood in my bedroom doorway at 11:47 p.m., staring at the expensive timepiece gleaming on Laura's nightstand like a beacon of betrayal. My wife lay sprawled across our king-size bed, her auburn hair fanned across the pillow, breathing with the deep rhythm of someone who'd had a very busy evening. The watch cost more than my monthly salary as an IT technician for the city's water department. I knew because I'd priced one exactly like it 3 Christmases ago, back when I still thought expensive gifts might save our marriage. "Laura," I whispered. She didn't stir. The digital clock cast red numbers across her face. 11:48. I'd been working late again, fixing the servers that kept the city's infrastructure running while she was apparently entertaining guests who left $1,000 accessories behind. I picked up the Rolex. The inscription on the back read, "To Scott, all my love, Monica." My stomach dropped. Scott Morrison, the mortgage broker who'd been sniffing around Laura at every hospital fundraiser for the past year. The same Scott Morrison who was married to Monica, a pediatric nurse at Laura's hospital. The irony wasn't lost on me. Scott was cheating on his wife with my wife, using a watch his wife had given him. I set the Rolex back down exactly where I'd found it. Laura stirred, mumbling something incoherent before rolling away from me. Even in sleep, she was pulling away. Walking to the kitchen, I poured 3 fingers of bourbon and sat at our granite breakfast bar, another of Laura's expensive necessities that had maxed out our credit cards. The house felt different now, contaminated by the knowledge of what had happened in our bedroom while I was troubleshooting network failures. My phone buzzed. A text from my buddy Mick O'Sullivan, who owned Flanagan's Pub downtown. "How'd the anniversary dinner go?" I'd forgotten. Today marked 17 years of marriage. Laura had forgotten too, apparently. She'd been too busy commemorating with someone else. I typed back, "Memorable." Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, and tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. The bourbon burned, but not as much as the image of Scott Morrison's hands on my wife. I'd always known Laura was ambitious, image-obsessed, constantly comparing our life to her hospital colleagues who drove BMWs and vacationed in Europe, but I'd never imagined she'd go this far. My daughter Beth's backpack sat by the front door, ready for school tomorrow. At 15, she was already showing signs of Laura's entitlement, rolling her eyes whenever I suggested she get a part-time job or help with chores. Our younger daughter, Janie, 12, still talked to me, but I could see Laura's influence growing stronger every day. I finished the bourbon and headed back upstairs. Laura hadn't moved. The Rolex still gleamed accusingly on her nightstand. I grabbed my pillow and headed for the guest room. As I passed Beth's room, I heard her whisper arguing with someone on her phone. "My dad's so embarrassing. Mom says he has no ambition." The guest room smelled like the lavender air freshener Laura bought in bulk from some multi-level marketing scheme she'd briefly joined. I lay on the narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, planning my next move. Tomorrow, I'd confirm what I already knew. Then I'd decide what to do about it. But first, I needed to understand exactly how deep this betrayal went. Laura left for work at 7:15 a.m., same as always. She kissed my cheek with lips that had probably kissed Scott Morrison 12 hours earlier, told me she'd be working late again, and reminded me to pick up Beth from volleyball practice. The Rolex was gone from her nightstand. I waited until 8:30 after the girls caught their school bus before I made my move. Laura's laptop sat on the kitchen counter where she always left it, password protected, but not from someone who'd been fixing computers for 15 years. Her email revealed nothing obvious. Laura was too smart for that. But her browser history told a different story. Searches for discreet hotels near downtown, how to delete text messages permanently, and most damning, divorce lawyers in Massachusetts. My hands shook as I scrolled through her recent activity. She'd been planning this for months. Her phone was the real treasure trove, but she kept it locked and with her always now. I'd need a different approach. I called in sick to work and drove to Flanagan's Pub. At 10 a.m., it was nearly empty, except for 2 regulars nursing beers and watching morning talk shows. Mick was restocking bottles behind the bar, his thick Irish accent cutting through the dim atmosphere as he cursed at a stubborn whiskey bottle. "Tommy boy," he called when he saw me. "You look like hell warmed over." Mick O'Sullivan had been a Boston cop for 20 years before buying Flanagan's with his pension money. He was built like a fire hydrant, short, solid, and impossible to move when he didn't want to be. More importantly, he had connections throughout the city and a talent for finding information people preferred to keep hidden. "I need a favor," I said, sliding onto a bar stool. "This about Laura?" I shouldn't have been surprised he knew. Mick made it his business to know everything happening in our small city. "She's cheating," I said simply. Mick poured 2 whiskeys without being asked. "Scott Morrison." "You knew?" "Tommy, everyone knows. They've been meeting at the Riverside Motel every Tuesday and Thursday for 3 months. Morrison pays cash, thinks he's being clever. Mick slid the whiskey across the bar. Question is, what are you going to do about it? The whiskey burned less than my pride. I need proof? Real proof. You sure you want that? Sometimes it's better not to know the details. I'm sure. Mick studied my face for a long moment, then reached under the bar and pulled out a business card. My nephew Danny does private investigation work. Discreet, professional, reasonable rates. I pocketed the card. What else do you know about Morrison? Cocky bastard thinks his city council connections make him untouchable. Lives in that new loft complex downtown, drives a black BMW, owes money to some people who don't accept late payments. Mick leaned across the bar. But here's what you really need to know. His wife Monica doesn't know yet, and Morrison's been skimming from his brokerage accounts to pay for his extracurricular activities. This information hit me like a physical blow. Not only was Scott destroying my marriage, he was stupid enough to commit financial crimes while doing it. How do you know all this? Morrison's a regular at Murphy's Casino. Talks too much when he's losing, which is often. Mick refilled my glass. Tommy, you're a good man. Too good maybe, but if you're going to fight this, you need to fight smart. These people think they're better than you, but they're just better at hiding their dirt. I finished the second whiskey and stood up. Thanks, Mick. Tommy? He called as I reached the door. Oh, whatever you decide to do, make sure you can live with it afterward. I spent the afternoon driving around town, seeing familiar places with new eyes. The hospital where Laura worked and first met Scott. The Riverside Motel where they had been meeting. Scott's loft building with its pretentious glass facade and his BMW parked in the resident lot. At 3:30, I picked up Beth from volleyball practice. She slumped into the passenger seat with the theatrical exhaustion only teenagers could manage. Mom says you might be getting divorced, she said without preamble. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. What exactly did Mom say? That you two have grown apart? That sometimes people change and want different things? Beth's voice carried Laura's inflections perfectly. She says it's nobody's fault. Nobody's fault except Scott Morrison's, I thought, and Laura's, and maybe mine for being too blind to see it coming. What do you think about that? I asked. Beth shrugged. All my friends' parents are divorced. At least I'd get 2 Christmases. The casual acceptance in her voice broke something inside me. This was what Laura had reduced our family to, a convenience to be dissolved when it no longer served her purposes. That evening, I called Danny O'Sullivan. Danny O'Sullivan looked nothing like his Uncle Mick. Where Mick was built like a bulldog, Danny was tall and lean, with the kind of forgettable face that made him perfect for surveillance work. We met at a Dunkin' Donuts on the outskirts of town, away from curious eyes. Uncle Mick says you need documentation, Danny said, stirring sugar into his coffee. Photos, recordings, whatever you can get. I slid an envelope across the table containing $1,000 in cash, money I'd withdrawn from our emergency fund. How long will it take? If they're as careless as Mick says, maybe a week, 2 at most. Danny pocketed the envelope without counting it. What's your endgame here? Divorce court? I haven't decided yet. Danny nodded. He'd probably heard that before. Fair warning, sometimes the evidence is worse than people expect. You sure you want to see everything? Yes. All right. I'll call you when I have something. The next few days passed in surreal normalcy. Laura continued her routine of leaving early and coming home late, always with plausible excuses about hospital meetings or administrative responsibilities. She was attentive at dinner, asking about my work and the girls' school activities with the practiced interest of someone following a script. The girls seemed oblivious to the undercurrents. Beth complained about her teachers and gossiped about classmates. Janie showed me her art projects and asked for help with math homework. Normal family life, except for the growing hollow feeling in my chest. On Thursday evening, Laura announced she'd be working late again. Big meeting with Dr. Patel about the new emergency protocols, she said, kissing my forehead before heading upstairs to change clothes. Through our bedroom window, I watched her get into her Honda Accord and drive toward downtown. 15 minutes later, I was following at a distance, my heart hammering against my ribs. The Riverside Motel sat on a strip of forgotten businesses between the hospital district and the highway. Laura's car was parked behind the building, partially hidden by a dumpster. Scott's BMW sat 3 spaces away. I parked across the street and waited. The motel's neon sign flickered "Vacancy" in pink letters, casting strange shadows across the cracked asphalt. Room 237 had lights on and curtains drawn. My phone buzzed. A text from Laura. Meeting running long. Don't wait up. I sat in my car for 2 hours, watching that lit window, imagining what was happening inside. Other cars came and went. Traveling salesmen, couples conducting their own affairs, people whose lives had led them to this shabby place for temporary escape. At 10:30, the lights went out. 20 minutes later, Laura emerged first, checking her surroundings before hurrying to her car. Scott followed 5 minutes after that, casual and confident, like he owned the world. I followed Laura home, staying far enough back to avoid detection. She arrived 15 minutes before I did, just enough time to change clothes and create the illusion she'd been home for hours. "How was the meeting?" I asked when I came through the front door. "Exhausting," she said, not looking up from her magazine. "Dr. Patel wants to restructure the entire emergency intake process." The lie came so easily, I wondered how many others I'd missed over the years. My phone rang the next afternoon while I was replacing a failed hard drive at the water treatment plant. Danny's name appeared on the screen. "We need to meet," he said simply. This time we met at a park on the north side of town, away from anyone who might recognize us. Danny handed me a manila envelope thick with photographs and documents. "You were right about Tuesday and Thursday," he said. "But it's also Saturday afternoons when Morrison tells his wife he's playing golf." The first photograph showed Laura and Scott entering the motel room, his hand on the small of her back in a gesture of casual intimacy that hit me like a physical blow. The subsequent photos documented their routine. Always the same room, always the same careful timing. But it was the audio transcript that destroyed me completely. Danny had managed to plant a listening device in the motel room during one of their encounters. The transcript was clinical in its detail, reducing my wife's betrayal to typed dialogue on white paper. "I can't keep doing this," Laura's voice transcribed in black ink. "You said that last week," Scott's reply. "Tom's getting suspicious. And your wife asked me about the watch. Monica doesn't know anything, and your husband's too stupid to figure it out." "He's not stupid. He's just trusting." "Same thing." Their laughter, noted in the transcript as "both subjects laugh," felt like acid in my veins. The conversation continued for 3 pages, detailing their plans for the future. Scott was going to leave Monica after the holidays. Laura would file for divorce in the spring, citing irreconcilable differences. They'd already looked at houses together, planning their new life with the casual certainty of people who believed they deserved whatever they wanted. "There's more," Danny said quietly. The final section of the transcript revealed the depth of their calculation. They discussed my weaknesses, my job prospects, how to minimize Laura's financial exposure in the divorce. Scott had connections with lawyers and judges. Laura had been documenting every argument we'd had, every moment of tension, building a case that I was an unfit husband and father. "Your wife's been recording conversations with you," Danny said, "building evidence that you're emotionally unstable, possibly dangerous. She's playing a long game here." I stared at the photographs until they blurred. "How long have you known?" I suspected when I saw how organized this was. This isn't a simple affair. It's a calculated destruction of your marriage designed to leave you with nothing. The envelope contained one final surprise: financial records showing Laura had been moving money from our joint accounts into a private account Scott had helped her establish. Over the past 6 months, she'd transferred nearly $15,000, money I'd earned fixing computers and maintaining city infrastructure while she planned my destruction. "What do you want to do with this?" Danny asked. I looked at the evidence of my wife's betrayal, feeling something cold and hard crystallizing in my chest. Laura and Scott thought I was too stupid and trusting to fight back. They'd underestimated me completely. "I want you to keep watching them," I said. "And I want to know everything about Scott Morrison's business dealings. Tommy, be careful. Whatever you're planning." "I'm not planning anything yet," I interrupted. "But when I do, I want to make sure I have all the information I need." Danny nodded slowly. "This is going to get expensive." "Don't worry about the money. I'll find it." That evening, Laura came home with flowers, grocery store roses that probably cost $8. She kissed me with unusual passion and suggested we open a bottle of wine. "I've been thinking about us," she said, curling against me on the couch. "Maybe we should plan a vacation. Just the 2 of us." I held her close, smelling Scott Morrison's cologne still faint in her hair, and smiled. "That sounds wonderful." "I love you, Tom," she whispered. "I love you too," I replied, meaning it completely and knowing it was probably the last honest thing either of us would say to each other. Laura's sudden affection lasted exactly 3 days. By Monday, she was back to her pattern of early departures and late arrivals, but now I understood the performance for what it was: guilt management disguised as renewed interest in our marriage. I began my own performance, playing the role of the oblivious husband while quietly gathering intelligence. Danny's surveillance continued, documenting every meeting, every lie, every moment of Laura and Scott's carefully orchestrated deception. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source: my 12-year-old daughter, Janie. "Dad, why does Mom have two phones?" she asked over breakfast Thursday morning. Laura had already left for work, and Beth was upstairs getting ready for school. I kept my voice casual. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "I saw her talking on a different phone yesterday, a red one. She was in the garage and didn't know I was there." Janie spooned cereal into her mouth, unaware she just handed me the key to everything. She was laughing and saying she missed someone. A burner phone. Laura was more careful than I'd given her credit for. That afternoon, I searched the garage methodically. The red phone was hidden inside an old paint can on the highest shelf, wrapped in a plastic bag. Laura had chosen her hiding spot well, somewhere I'd never look unless I was specifically searching. The phone's call log revealed everything, dozens of calls and texts between Laura and Scott, but also communications with people I didn't recognize. A divorce attorney named Patricia Hendricks, a private investigator who wasn't Danny, a real estate agent. But the most damaging discovery was a series of text messages between Laura and her best friend Jenna Walsh, who owned a boutique clothing store downtown. "Tom's getting suspicious," Laura had written 3 days ago. "Stick to the plan," Jenna replied. "Document everything. Make him look unstable. I feel bad about the girls. They'll be better off without him. You're doing this for them, too. Scott says his lawyer can make sure Tom gets minimal custody." Good. The girls need stability, not some loser who fixes computers for a living. I photographed every message, my hands shaking with rage. Jenna Walsh had been in my house dozens of times, had eaten meals I'd cooked, had smiled and laughed and pretended to be my friend while secretly orchestrating my destruction. The conspiracy was larger than I'd imagined. Laura wasn't just cheating, she was leading a coordinated campaign to destroy my reputation, my relationship with my daughters, and my financial future. But she'd made one critical mistake. She'd underestimated exactly how much damage a man with nothing left to lose could inflict. I returned the phone to its hiding place and drove to Flanagan's pub. Mick was training a new bartender, a college kid who looked terrified of the tap system. "Tommy," Mick called when he saw me, "you look like a man with a plan. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." Mick sent the college kid to clean tables and poured 2 whiskeys. "Shoot." "If someone was systematically destroying your life, documenting every conversation to make you look crazy, planning to take your kids and your money, what would you do?" "How hypothetical are we talking here?" "Not very." Mick studied my face for a long moment. I'd make sure they regretted underestimating me. But I'd be smart about it. No point in winning the battle if you lose the war. "What if I told you Laura's been recording our conversations, building a case that I'm unstable? What if I told you she's got Jenna Walsh helping her, and Scott Morrison's connected to judges and lawyers? I'd say you're outnumbered, but not outgunned." Mick leaned across the bar. "Tommy, these people think they're smarter than you because they have college degrees and fancy jobs. But smart and clever aren't the same thing. They've been playing checkers while you've been learning chess. I don't want to just survive this, Mick. I want them to pay for what they've done. Then you need to hit them where they're vulnerable. Morrison's got financial problems and a wife who doesn't know about his extracurricular activities. Laura's got a reputation at the hospital she spent years building. Jenna's got a business that depends on her image as a trustworthy friend to other women." The plan began forming in my mind, cold and methodical. I need to know more about Morrison's business problems. That I can help with. Mick pulled out his phone and made a call. After a brief conversation in what sounded like code, he hung up. Morrison owes $60,000 to some investors who don't advertise in the yellow pages, if you catch my meaning. He's been using client escrow accounts to cover his gambling debts. That's embezzlement. Sure is. And if the state banking commission found out, Morrison would lose his license and probably face criminal charges. How would someone report that kind of thing? Mick smiled. Hypothetically, anonymous tip to the state banking commission, backed up by financial records showing irregular transfers from client accounts. And how would someone get those financial records? Well, if someone knew Morrison's social security number and mother's maiden name, they might be able to access his business accounts online. Hypothetically speaking. I finished my whiskey and stood up. Thanks for the hypothetical advice. Tommy? Mick called as I reached the door. Remember what I said about being smart. Don't let anger make you stupid. That evening, Laura came home early with Chinese takeout and a bottle of wine. She was unusually talkative during dinner, asking detailed questions about my day and encouraging the girls to share stories from school. I was thinking, she said after Beth and Janie had gone upstairs to do homework, maybe we should see a marriage counselor. Work on our communication. The irony was breathtaking. Laura wanted to improve our communication while secretly recording our conversations to use against me in divorce court. That's a great idea, I said. I think we both have things we need to work on. I'm glad you're open to it. I've already made some calls. Of course she had. Probably to a counselor who would help document my emotional instability. Laura, I said, taking her hand across the dinner table, I want you to know that whatever problems we've had, I'm committed to making this work. You and the girls are the most important things in my life. She squeezed my hand, and for a moment, I saw something that might have been genuine regret in her eyes. I know, Tom, and I want to make this work too. It was probably the last honest moment we'd ever share. Later that night, while Laura showered, I used her laptop to research Scott Morrison's business history. Public records revealed a pattern of complaints and investigations, all resolved through legal maneuvering and political connections. But the pattern was clear. Scott Morrison was a predator, who used his position to take advantage of vulnerable clients. I also researched Patricia Hendricks, the divorce attorney Laura had been consulting. Hendricks specialized in high-conflict divorces and had a reputation for destroying opposing parties through character assassination and financial warfare. But every predator had weaknesses, and every strategy had counters. Laura and her conspirators had made the mistake of believing their own propaganda about my stupidity and passivity. They were about to learn the difference between stupid and underestimated. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove to Boston. The Massachusetts State Banking Commission occupied a sterile office building downtown, filled with bureaucrats who took financial crimes very seriously. I'd spent the previous evening gathering Scott Morrison's personal information from public records and social media. His mother's maiden name was helpfully listed on a genealogy website his wife Monica had created. His social security number took more work, but a combination of voter registration records and property documents provided the necessary digits. Armed with this information, I'd accessed Scott's business banking accounts and discovered exactly what Mick had suggested I'd find. Over the past 8 months, Scott had transferred nearly $80,000 from client escrow accounts into his personal accounts, using the money to cover gambling debts and finance his affair with Laura. The Banking Commission investigator, a sharp-eyed woman named Catherine Moore, reviewed my anonymous submission with professional interest. These are serious allegations, she said, scrolling through the financial records I'd printed. Misuse of client funds is a felony. I thought you should know, I said, maintaining my role as a concerned citizen who'd stumbled across this information. People trust mortgage brokers with their life savings. We'll investigate immediately. If these allegations are substantiated, Mr. Morrison will face criminal charges and lose his license. I left Boston feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Scott Morrison's world was about to collapse, and he had no idea it was coming. My next stop was Jenna Walsh's boutique, Sophisticated Lady, located in the trendy downtown shopping district. The store specialized in expensive clothes for professional women, exactly the kind of place Laura loved to spend money we didn't have. Jenna was helping a customer when I entered, her smile faltering slightly when she saw me. At 39, she was attractive in a calculated way, with perfectly styled blonde hair and makeup that probably took an hour to apply each morning. "Tom," she called with forced enthusiasm. "What brings you here? Shopping for Laura?" "Actually, I wanted to talk to you about Laura. Do you have a few minutes?" Jenna's customer left with a bag full of overpriced clothes, and we were alone in the store. Jenna's smile became more genuine, probably assuming I was going to confide in her about my marriage problems. "I'm worried about Laura," I said, playing my part perfectly. "She's been acting strange lately. Distant, secretive." "Oh, Tom." Jenna's voice dripped with false sympathy. "I've been worried too. Laura's been under so much stress at work." "Has she said anything to you? About us, I mean?" Jenna hesitated, probably calculating how much of Laura's plan she should reveal. "She's mentioned that you two have been having some difficulties. Communication problems. I love her so much, Jenna. I'd do anything to save our marriage." I let my voice crack slightly. Sometimes I feel like I'm losing my mind. Like maybe I am the problem. "Oh, honey, no." Jenna moved closer, placing a comforting hand on my arm. "You're a good man, Tom. But sometimes people grow apart. Sometimes they want different things. What should I do? Maybe you should talk to someone, a professional, someone who can help you work through your feelings." Jenna was encouraging me to seek therapy, probably hoping I'd be diagnosed with depression or anxiety, conditions Laura could use against me in divorce proceedings. The manipulation was breathtaking in its cruelty. "You're such a good friend," I said. "Laura's lucky to have someone like you looking out for her." "We look out for each other," Jenna replied. "That's what friends do." I left the boutique with everything I needed. Jenna had confirmed her role in the conspiracy while revealing the depth of her contempt for me. She saw me as a pathetic obstacle to Laura's happiness, someone to be managed and ultimately discarded. But I wasn't done gathering intelligence. My next stop was the hospital where Laura worked as an emergency department administrator. The lobby buzzed with activity, patients, visitors, medical staff moving with purposeful urgency. I'd been here dozens of times for hospital fundraisers and holiday parties, always as Laura's supportive husband. Doctor. Rajesh Patel, the emergency department chief, was a small, intense man who'd immigrated from India 20 years earlier. He and Laura had worked together for 5 years, and I'd always respected his dedication to his patients. Tom, Doctor, Patel seemed genuinely pleased to see me. How are you? Laura mentioned you've been working long hours. The city's computer systems never sleep, I replied. Actually, I wanted to ask you about Laura. She's been working so many late nights lately. I'm worried she's burning herself out. Dr. Patel looked confused. Late nights? Tom, Laura rarely works past 5 o'clock. We've actually been encouraging her to take on more evening responsibilities, but she says she needs to be home with the girls. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I kept my expression neutral. Oh, she must be talking about those meetings with the administrative staff? The protocol reviews. What protocol reviews? Tom, I think there might be some miscommunication here. I backpedaled quickly. You know how it is with hospital bureaucracy. I probably misunderstood what she was telling me. Dr. Patel nodded, but I could see concern in his eyes. Tom, is everything all right at home? Laura's seemed distracted lately, and her work quality has been inconsistent. We're fine, I lied. Just the usual stress of raising teenagers. I left the hospital with confirmation that Laura's late-night meetings were complete fabrications. Doctor, Patel's comments about her work quality suggested her affair was affecting her professional performance, information that might prove useful later. That evening, I implemented the next phase of my plan. Using Scott Morrison's personal information, I created anonymous social media accounts and began posting carefully crafted messages on local community forums. Has anyone else had problems with Scott Morrison at Pinnacle Mortgage? He seems to be having some personal issues that are affecting his professionalism. I heard Scott Morrison is having financial problems. Should I be worried about my loan application? Someone told me Scott Morrison's been seen at Murphy's Casino during business hours. Is that normal for mortgage brokers? The posts were subtle, designed to plant seeds of doubt rather than make specific accusations. But in a small city where reputation was everything, even whispered concerns could be devastating. I also began documenting Laura's lies with methodical precision. Every false claim about working late, every fabricated meeting, every moment of her performance as the loving wife while secretly planning my destruction. The evidence files grew thicker each day. Photographs, audio recordings, financial records, witness statements. I was building a case that would destroy not just Laura's divorce strategy, but her entire carefully constructed image. But I wasn't ready to deploy my weapons yet. First, I wanted to understand the full scope of their conspiracy. How many people were involved? How long had they been planning this? What was their ultimate goal? The answers came from an unexpected source, my 15-year-old daughter, Beth. Dad, she said one evening while I was helping her with algebra homework, Mom asked me some weird questions yesterday. What kind of questions? About you. Like, do you ever lose your temper? Have I ever been afraid of you? Do you drink too much? Beth looked confused. I told her you never yell at us, and you hardly ever drink except for a beer while watching football. Laura was coaching our daughters to provide testimony against me, trying to create evidence of domestic instability that didn't exist. The realization filled me with cold rage. Why would Mom ask those things? Beth continued. I don't know, sweetheart. Maybe she's worried about stress at work affecting our family. Beth accepted this explanation, but I could see the seeds of doubt in her eyes. Laura's manipulation was forcing our daughters to question their own perceptions of reality. That night, after Laura came home from another late meeting that Dr. Patel would have been surprised to learn about, I made my decision. The counterattack would begin tomorrow. Friday morning arrived with the first snow of the season, coating our suburban neighborhood in deceptive white purity. Laura left early for another fabricated work commitment, kissing me goodbye with lips that had been kissing Scott Morrison for months. I waited until the girls caught their school bus, then drove to Danny O'Sullivan's office. He operated out of a small space above a dry cleaner, the kind of anonymous location that suited his profession perfectly. I've got what you asked for, Danny said, sliding a thick folder across his desk. Morrison's financial records, business communications, even some personal stuff you might find interesting. The folder contained devastating evidence of Scott Morrison's criminal activity. Bank records showing systematic theft from client accounts. Email communications with known gambling associates. Even photographs of Scott at Murphy's Casino during business hours, betting money that belonged to his clients. But the most damaging discovery was a series of text messages between Scott and a woman named Crystal Martinez. who worked as a paralegal at Patricia Hendricks' law firm. Your wife's attorney has been feeding Morrison information about divorce strategy, Danny explained. They've been planning this for almost a year, using inside knowledge of family court procedures to maximize Laura's settlement while minimizing your rights. The conspiracy was even more extensive than I'd imagined. Laura, Scott, Jenna, and now a corrupt lawyer and her paralegal, all working together to destroy my life while enriching themselves. There's more, Danny continued. Morrison's been promising to leave his wife Monica for months, but he's actually been looking at houses with another woman, someone named Ashley Chen, who works at the bank. I stared at the photographs of Scott with a young Asian woman, their body language clearly intimate. He's cheating on his wife with Laura and cheating on Laura with this Ashley person. Looks that way. Morrison's playing multiple angles, probably planning to disappear with the bank money and leave everyone else holding the bag. The irony was perfect. Laura thought she was Scott's partner in a sophisticated plan to upgrade their lives, but she was actually just another victim of his manipulation. What do you want to do with all this? Danny asked. I studied the evidence spread across his desk. Financial crimes, adultery, conspiracy, fraud. Enough ammunition to destroy everyone involved, but I needed to deploy it strategically. I want you to make copies of everything and store them in a safe place, I said. Then I want you to deliver specific packages to specific people, but not until I give you the signal. What kind of signal? You'll know it when you see it. I spent the afternoon preparing for the evening's confrontation. Laura had announced another late meeting, this one supposedly with hospital board members about budget allocations. I'd already confirmed with Dr. Patel that no such meeting was scheduled. At 6:30 p.m., I drove to the Riverside Motel and parked across the street. Laura's Honda arrived at 7:15, followed 5 minutes later by Scott's BMW. They'd settled into a comfortable routine, confident in their deception. But tonight would be different. I waited until 8 p.m., then walked across the street and knocked on the door of room 237. The sounds from inside stopped immediately. Housekeeping, I called in a falsely high voice. We don't need anything, Scott's voice replied. Manager says there's a water leak in the room above you. I need to check your ceiling for damage. I heard whispered conversation, then footsteps. The door opened to reveal Scott Morrison wearing only a hotel bathrobe, his hair disheveled and his face flushed with annoyance. There's no water leak, he said. And you're not housekeeping? No, I agreed, pushing past him into the room. I'm Laura's husband. Laura sat on the bed wrapped in a sheet, her face shifting between shock, fear, and calculation. The room carried the scent of betrayal, with cheap air freshener failing to hide the reality of what had been happening here for months. Tom, Laura said, her voice carefully controlled. This isn't what it looks like. Really? Because it looks like my wife is with another man in a motel room while lying to me about working late. Scott had recovered from his initial surprise and was trying to assert dominance. You need to leave, now, before this gets ugly. Gets ugly? I laughed, the sound harsh in the small room. Scott, it's been ugly for months. I'm just catching up to the program. Tom, please, Laura said, clutching the sheet against her chest. Let's go home and talk about this like adults. Like adults? Laura, you've been recording our conversations to use against me in divorce court. You've been stealing money from our joint accounts. You've been coaching our daughters to lie about me. I pulled out my phone and showed them photographs of their motel meetings. Did you really think I was too stupid to figure this out? The color drained from Laura's face. Scott moved toward his clothes, probably looking for his phone to call for help. I wouldn't, I said calmly. Because if you call anyone, I'll call your wife Monica and tell her where you are. Then I'll call the State Banking Commission and tell them about the $80,000 you've stolen from client accounts. Scott froze. You don't know what you're talking about. Escrow account number 447-891-2156. Transferred to your personal account in increments of $5,000 over the past 8 months. Want me to keep going? Laura was staring at Scott with growing horror. What is he talking about? What client accounts? It's nothing, Scott said quickly. A temporary cash flow issue. Everything's been repaid. No, it hasn't, I said. In fact, you used some of that money to pay for this room and the jewelry you've been buying Laura. Diamonds, you might call them. Tom, stop, Laura pleaded. Whatever you think you know. I know everything, Laura. I know about Jenna helping you document my supposed instability. I know about Patricia Hendricks feeding Scott information about divorce strategy. I know about Crystal Martinez at the law firm. I paused for effect. And I know about Ashley Chen. Laura looked confused. Who's Ashley Chen? I showed her the photographs of Scott with the young bank employee. Scott's other girlfriend. The one he's actually planning a future with while you're just a convenient distraction. The room fell silent, except for the hum of the heating unit. Laura stared at the photographs, her face cycling through disbelief, rage, and humiliation. "Is this true?" she asked Scott. "Laura, I can explain." "Is it true?" Scott's silence was answer enough. Laura's carefully constructed fantasy crumbled in real time, replaced by the devastating reality that she'd been played by a master manipulator. "You bastard," she whispered. "You lying, cheating bastard." "That's rich," I said, coming from someone who's been lying and cheating for months. Laura turned her fury on me. "Don't you dare judge me, Tom. You have no idea what it's like being married to someone with no ambition, no drive, no what? No willingness to commit felonies to maintain a lifestyle we can't afford?" I interrupted. "Laura, I fix computers and maintain city infrastructure. It's honest work that pays our bills and provides health insurance for our family. I'm sorry that's not glamorous enough for you." "You don't understand," Laura said, tears streaming down her face. "I wanted more. I deserved more." "You deserved honesty. You deserved respect. You deserved a husband who wouldn't steal from clients or cheat with multiple women." I looked at Scott, who was frantically getting dressed. "But you chose him instead." Scott finished buttoning his shirt and moved toward the door. "This is over. Laura, get dressed. We're leaving." "No," Laura said quietly. "We're not." Scott stopped. "What?" "It's over, Scott. Whatever this was, it's over." The power dynamic in the room shifted completely. Scott Morrison, who'd been so confident in his manipulation of multiple women, suddenly found himself abandoned by his primary accomplice. "Laura, you're upset. You're not thinking clearly." "I'm thinking more clearly than I have in months." Laura looked at me with something that might have been regret. "Tom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Sorry you got caught, or sorry you destroyed our family. Both. All of it. I don't know how this got so out of control." Scott Morrison left without another word, probably calculating how quickly he could disappear before the banking commission investigation destroyed his life. Laura and I sat in the motel room, 17 years of marriage reduced to this moment of brutal honesty. "What happens now?" Laura asked. "Now you get dressed and we go home to our daughters. Tomorrow you call Patricia Hendricks and fire her. You tell Jenna Walsh that her services as a co-conspirator are no longer needed. And you pray that I don't decide to share everything I know with everyone you work with. And then we see if there's anything left of our marriage worth saving." Laura nodded, tears still streaming down her face. "Tom, I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but you're right. You don't deserve it. But our daughters deserve parents who try to work things out before destroying their family." We drove home in separate cars, Laura following me through the snowy streets of our small city. The house looked the same as always, but everything had changed. Beth and Janie were doing homework at the kitchen table, unaware that their parents' marriage had just exploded and been tentatively reassembled in a motel room. "How was your meeting, Mom?" Beth asked without looking up from her textbook. Laura glanced at me, then answered, "It was very educational." That night, Laura slept in the guest room while I lay awake in our bed, staring at the ceiling and wondering if we could ever rebuild what she'd destroyed. The evidence of her betrayal was still hidden throughout the house: the burner phone, the secret bank account, the recorded conversations. But Scott Morrison's world was about to collapse, and that knowledge gave me a cold satisfaction that felt almost like justice. Almost. The Massachusetts State Banking Commission moved faster than I'd expected. By Monday morning, Scott Morrison's office was sealed with official notices, and his assets were frozen pending investigation. The local newspaper ran a front-page story about the mortgage broker accused of embezzling client funds, complete with Scott's professional headshot and a detailed accounting of his alleged crimes. I read the article over coffee while Laura sat across from me, picking at toast she couldn't seem to swallow. The girls had already left for school, sparing us the pretense of normal family breakfast conversation. "Oh, they arrested him," Laura said quietly, staring at Scott's photograph in the newspaper. "Good. Tom, I need you to know that I didn't know about the money, about what he was doing to his clients. I studied my wife's face, looking for signs of deception I'd missed for months. Would it have mattered if you had known?" Laura considered the question longer than I'd expected. "I don't know. I want to say yes, but I honestly don't know." Her honesty was more devastating than any lie could have been. The woman I'd married 17 years ago would have been horrified by Scott Morrison's crimes. But that woman had been replaced by someone willing to destroy her own family for the promise of a more exciting life. My phone rang. Danny O'Sullivan's name appeared on the screen. "Turn on Channel 7, he said without preamble. I found the remote and switched to the local news station. A reporter stood outside Monica Morrison's house, microphone in hand, as she delivered breaking news. Monica Morrison, wife of accused embezzler Scott Morrison, was discovered this morning in what police describe as an apparent suicide. Mrs. Morrison, a pediatric nurse at City General Hospital, left a note expressing her anguish over her husband's alleged crimes and infidelity. The remote fell from my hand. Laura gasped, covering her mouth in horror. The reporter continued. Sources close to the investigation say Mrs. Morrison had recently learned of her husband's extramarital affairs and financial crimes. She was scheduled to testify before a grand jury next week. I turned off the television, and we sat in silence. Monica Morrison had lost her life because of choices Laura and Scott had made, because of a conspiracy that had spiraled far beyond anyone's control. "Oh, God," Laura whispered. "Oh, God, what have we done?" "We didn't do anything," I said coldly. "You and Scott did this. You and your friends who thought other people's lives were acceptable collateral damage for your happiness." Laura began crying, deep sobs that shook her entire body. I felt nothing. The part of me that would have comforted her, that would have held her while she grieved for the woman whose husband she'd stolen, had died in that motel room. "I have to go to work," I said, standing up from the table. "Tom, please, we need to talk about this." "There's nothing to discuss. Monica Morrison lost her life because of choices you made. Live with that." I left Laura crying at the kitchen table and drove to the water treatment facility, where the familiar routine of maintaining computer systems provided temporary escape from the chaos at home. But even work couldn't distract me from the knowledge that my quest for justice had contributed to an innocent woman's end. By afternoon, the story had spread throughout our small city. Monica Morrison's suicide dominated local news and social media, with Scott Morrison's arrest and alleged affairs providing salacious details that fed the community's appetite for scandal. Laura called me twice, but I didn't answer. She needed to face the consequences of her actions without my support, needed to understand that some betrayals couldn't be forgiven with tears and apologies. At 3:30, I picked up Beth from volleyball practice. She was unusually quiet during the drive home, staring out the window at the gray November landscape. "Dad," she said finally, "kids at school are saying Mom was involved with that man who got arrested, the one whose wife destroyed herself." My hands tightened on the steering wheel. What are they saying? That Mom and Mr. Morrison were having an affair, that his wife found out and that's why she... Beth's voice trailed off. "It's not true, is it?" I pulled into our driveway and turned off the engine. Beth deserved honesty, but she was only 15 years old. How do you tell your daughter that her mother had helped destroy another woman's life? "Beth, your mother made some mistakes, adult mistakes that she's trying to fix. So it is true." "Yes." Beth nodded slowly, processing information that would change her relationship with Laura forever. Is that why you've been sleeping in separate rooms?" "Yes." "Are you getting divorced?" "I don't know yet." We sat in the car for several more minutes, watching our house through the windshield. It looked the same as always, but we both knew everything had changed. "Dad," Beth said quietly, "I'm scared." "Of what?" "Of everything falling apart, of having to choose sides, of people at school talking about our family." I reached over and took her hand. "Whatever happens between your mother and me, we both love you and Janie more than anything. That will never change." "Promise?" "Promise." We went inside to find Laura pacing the kitchen, her face red from crying. Janie sat at the counter doing homework, apparently unaware of the crisis consuming our family. "Tom," Laura said, "we need to talk. In private. Later. Right now, I need to help Janie with her math homework." "This can't wait." "Yes, it can." I spent the next hour helping Janie with fractions, grateful for the normalcy of elementary school mathematics. Laura disappeared upstairs, probably calling Jenna or her lawyer or whoever else remained in her support network. After dinner, while the girls watched television in the living room, Laura cornered me in the kitchen. "The police want to interview me," she said quietly, "about Scott and Monica." "What did you tell them?" "Nothing yet. They're coming tomorrow morning." "Laura, you need to tell them the truth. All of it." "What if they think I'm responsible for what Monica did?" "Aren't you?" The question hung between us like a physical presence. Laura's affair hadn't directly caused Monica Morrison's suicide, but it had been a contributing factor in a chain of events that led to an innocent woman's end. "I never wanted anyone to get hurt," Laura said, "but you didn't care if anyone got hurt, as long as you got what you wanted." "That's not fair." "Fair?" I laughed bitterly. "Laura, you spent months planning to destroy my life, steal my children, and take everything I'd worked for. You recorded private conversations to use against me in court. You coached our daughters to lie about me, and you're worried about what's fair." I know I made mistakes. Mistakes? Monica Morrison has lost her life. Scott Morrison is facing federal charges. Your conspiracy has destroyed multiple families, and you call it a mistake? Laura began crying again, but I felt no sympathy. The woman I'd married had been capable of empathy and remorse. This person was primarily concerned with avoiding consequences for her actions. What do you want me to do? She asked. I want you to tell the police everything. I want you to take responsibility for your choices, and I want you to figure out how to live with what you've done. And then? Then we'll see if there's anything left of our marriage to salvage. That night, I called Danny O'Sullivan and told him to destroy the remaining evidence files. Monica Morrison's had changed everything. My desire for revenge felt petty and cruel in the face of genuine tragedy. You sure about this? Danny asked. You've got enough ammunition to destroy everyone involved. I'm sure. It's over. What about your wife? You just gonna forgive and forget? I don't know yet, but I'm not going to become the kind of person who profits from someone else's suicide. I hung up and sat in the dark kitchen, thinking about choices and consequences, about the difference between justice and revenge. Laura's betrayal had nearly destroyed our family, but Monica Morrison's had shown me the ultimate cost of letting anger drive decisions. Tomorrow, Laura would face the police and begin the long process of accountability. Our marriage might not survive, but our daughters deserved parents who could find a way forward without destroying more lives. The quest for revenge was over. Now came the harder task of learning to live with the wreckage. The police interview lasted 3 hours. Detective Sarah O'Malley, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, questioned Laura with professional thoroughness while I sat in our living room, listening to my wife confess the details of her affair and its connection to Scott Morrison's crimes. Through the kitchen doorway, I could hear Laura's voice, sometimes strong, sometimes breaking, as she described the months of deception. She admitted to the affair, to the secret meetings, to her knowledge of Scott's gambling problems, though she maintained ignorance about his embezzlement. Mrs. Patterson, Detective O'Malley said at one point, did Mr. Morrison ever discuss his financial situation with you? He said he was having cash flow problems with his business. He said it was temporary, that he had some big deals closing soon. Laura's voice was barely audible. I didn't ask for details. Did you know he was married when your relationship began? Yes. Did you ever meet his wife, Monica Morrison? A long pause. A few times, at hospital functions. She seemed nice. The clinical nature of the questioning stripped away any remaining romance from Laura's affair, reducing it to a series of factual events that had contributed to a woman's end. When Detective O'Malley finally left, Laura sat at our kitchen table staring at her hands. She thinks I'm partially responsible, Laura said quietly. Are you? I don't know. Maybe. Probably. She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. Tom, I keep thinking about Monica's children. She had 2 little boys. I'd been thinking about them too. 8 and 10 years old, now orphaned by their father's crimes and their mother's despair. The Morrison boys would grow up knowing their father was a criminal and their mother had destroyed herself because of his betrayals. The funeral is Thursday, Laura continued. I want to go. That's not a good idea. I need to pay my respects. I need to... Laura, you're the other woman. Your presence at Monica Morrison's funeral would be cruel to her family and friends. The truth of this statement hit Laura like a physical blow. She'd been so focused on her own guilt and grief that she hadn't considered how her appearance would affect Monica's mourners. Then what do I do? How do I live with this? I don't know, but you figure it out without making it worse for everyone else. Over the next few days, our house felt like a crime scene. Neighbors whispered when we passed, and the girls came home from school with stories of classmates asking intrusive questions about their mother's involvement with Scott Morrison. Beth handled the attention with teenage stoicism, but 12-year-old Janie was confused and hurt by the sudden notoriety. She asked me repeatedly why people were saying mean things about Mom, and I struggled to explain adult failures to a child who still believed in fairness and simple morality. Did Mom do something bad? Janie asked one evening while I tucked her into bed. Mom made some choices that hurt people, I said carefully. She's very sorry about that. Will she go to jail like the man on TV? No, sweetheart. Mom didn't break any laws. Then why is everyone so angry at her? How do you explain adultery and betrayal to a 12-year-old? How do you describe the difference between legal and moral, between criminal and cruel? Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes that hurt other people, even when they don't mean to, I said finally. Mom is learning from her mistakes. Janie seemed satisfied with this explanation, but I knew the questions would continue. Our daughters would spend years processing the destruction of their parents' marriage and its connection to a stranger's suicide. On Thursday, Monica Morrison's funeral filled St. Patrick's Cathedral with mourners. Laura watched the coverage on local news, crying silently as the camera showed Monica's 2 young sons walking behind their mother's casket. Scott Morrison wasn't there. He remained in federal custody, facing charges that would likely result in years in prison. His mugshot had replaced his professional headshot in newspaper articles, transforming him from successful businessman to cautionary tale. "I did that to those boys," Laura whispered, watching the funeral procession. "I helped destroy their family." "Yes," I said simply. "You did." Laura looked at me with surprise, probably expecting comfort or contradiction, but I was done protecting her from the consequences of her choices. "What kind of person does that make me?" she asked. "That's something you'll have to figure out." The following week brought unexpected visitors. Jenna Walsh arrived at our house Tuesday evening, her usual polished appearance replaced by obvious stress and exhaustion. "Tom," she said when I answered the door, "I need to talk to you and Laura." "Laura's not here." This was true. She'd gone to the grocery store, probably seeking temporary escape from the house that had become a prison of guilt and recrimination. "Then I'll talk to you." Jenna pushed past me into the living room, her behavior more aggressive than I'd ever seen. "This whole situation is out of control." "What situation?" "Don't play dumb. The police interviewed me yesterday about Laura's affair. They're treating Monica Morrison's suicide like a criminal investigation." "Maybe because it is." Jenna spun around to face me, her carefully maintained composure cracking. "Tom, you need to understand something. Laura was unhappy. She felt trapped in a marriage that wasn't working. I was trying to help her find a way out. By encouraging her to have an affair with a married man? By encouraging her to take control of her life instead of settling for mediocrity. The word hung between us like an accusation. Mediocrity. That's how Jenna saw my marriage, my job, my entire existence, as something Laura needed to escape rather than repair. "Jenna, a woman lost her life because you and Laura decided my marriage was beneath her standards. That's not fair. We didn't know Scott was stealing money. We didn't know his wife would..." She couldn't finish the sentence. "Would destroy herself when she discovered her husband was a criminal and an adulterer? You didn't think that was a possibility? People get divorced all the time. Most people don't commit suicide. Most people don't discover their spouse is a felon who's been cheating with multiple women while stealing from clients." Jenna sat down heavily on our couch, the fight going out of her. "The police asked me about the recordings Laura made." "About the divorce strategy. They think we were part of some conspiracy. Weren't you? We were trying to protect Laura's interests in case things went badly, by documenting fake evidence that I was unstable and dangerous. Tom, you have to understand." "I understand. Perfectly. You and Laura decided I was expendable. You planned to destroy my reputation, take my children, and steal everything I'd worked for. The only thing you didn't plan for was Scott Morrison being a bigger criminal than you realized." Jenna left without saying goodbye, her boutique owner's confidence replaced by the hollow look of someone facing consequences she'd never considered. I didn't feel sorry for her. When Laura returned from the grocery store, I told her about Jenna's visit. "She's scared," Laura said, putting away groceries with mechanical precision. "She should be. You both should be. Tom, I know you hate me right now, but I need you to know that I never wanted Monica to die. I never wanted any of this to happen." "But you were willing to risk it happening, as long as you got what you wanted." Laura stopped putting away groceries and looked at me directly. "Yes, I was willing to risk it. And that makes me a terrible person." It was the first completely honest thing she had said since the motel room confrontation. No excuses, no justifications, no attempts to minimize her responsibility. "What happens now?" I asked. "I don't know. The hospital is conducting an internal investigation. They might fire me. Jenna's business is failing because nobody wants to associate with the women who helped destroy the Morrison family." Laura sat down at the kitchen table, looking older than her 38 years. "I've lost everything, Tom. My job, my friends, my reputation, my marriage. You didn't lose those things. You threw them away. I know." We sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of destroyed lives settling around us like dust. Outside, our neighbors were living normal lives, coming home from work, helping children with homework, planning weekend activities, simple pleasures that Laura had abandoned in pursuit of something more exciting. "Tom," she said finally, "is there any way we can fix this? Any way we can rebuild what I destroyed?" I considered the question seriously. Could I forgive a woman who'd planned my destruction? Could I trust someone who'd lied so skillfully for so long? Could our daughters respect a mother who'd helped cause another woman's suicide? "I don't know," I said honestly. "But if we're going to try, It has to start with complete honesty. No more lies, no more manipulation, no more recording conversations or plotting with friends. And if I can do that, if I can be completely honest from now on, then maybe we can figure out if there's anything left worth saving. Laura nodded, tears streaming down her face. I want to try, Tom. I want to be the person I was before all this started. That person is gone, Laura. The question is whether you can become someone better. That night, for the first time in months, Laura and I had a real conversation. She told me about the loneliness that had driven her to Scott Morrison, about feeling invisible and unappreciated in our marriage. I told her about the humiliation of discovering her betrayal, about the rage that had nearly consumed me, about the guilt I felt over Monica Morrison's end. We talked until dawn, two people trying to find their way back from the edge of destruction. It wasn't forgiveness. That would take much longer, if it came at all, but it was a beginning. 6 months later, Scott Morrison was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison for embezzlement and fraud. Laura had been fired from the hospital, but found work as a medical office administrator, a significant step down in prestige and salary. Jenna Walsh's boutique closed after her wealthy clients abandoned her, and she moved to another state to start over. Laura and I were still married, still trying to rebuild what she'd destroyed. Some days were better than others. Some days I could almost forget the betrayal and see glimpses of the woman I'd fallen in love with 17 years earlier. Other days, the memory of her conspiracy felt like an open wound. Our daughters were resilient in the way children often are, adapting to their parents' changed relationship with pragmatic acceptance. Beth, now 16, had developed a protective cynicism about adult promises. Janie, 13, still believed her parents could fix anything if they tried hard enough. The Morrison boys had moved to California to live with Monica's sister. I sometimes wondered how they were doing, whether they'd found peace in their new life or remained haunted by the circumstances of their mother's end. On the anniversary of Monica Morrison's suicide, Laura and I visited her grave. Laura left flowers and a note she didn't let me read. I stood silently, thinking about consequences and responsibility, about the ripple effects of selfish choices. I think about her every day, Laura said as we walked back to our car. Good, I replied. You should. It wasn't a romantic reconciliation or a fairy tale ending. It was something more complex and harder won. Two flawed people trying to build something honest from the wreckage of betrayal. Whether we'd succeed remained to be seen. But for the first time in over a year, it felt possible.